I'm really looking forward to our next fight at middleweight. We have Dirte, Andrew Sanchez, former Ultimate Fighter winner, taking on the Money Team's own. Yes, you read that or heard that correct if you're following along with subtitles. Makhmud Muradov. And Matt, I love this fight. I mean, Makhmud Muradov is on an unprecedented win streak going back to his regional days. He had beaten UFC level competition to make it into the dance. Alberto Uda and Wendell Oliveira were the two wins in Octagon that got him into the UFC. And so far in the UFC, wins over Alessio Di Chirico that we saw really ruin a hype train last weekend, getting the win over Joaquin
Buckley. He might have had the
Buckley.
worst post-fight press conference ever. I'm sorry, Alessio, but I couldn't get behind your message.
Yeah, you don't interview a guy that gets brutally knocked out. And for Muradov, he had a big win over Trevor Smith his last time out there. And it was a fight where Trevor Smith just got frustrated. He kept trying to close the distance, but Muradov, I don't know if I've ever seen a boxer type have such good foot movement from Makhmud Muradov, because he's very light on his feet. It's not like he does the Muhammad Ali shuffle, but man, he could. Like, his footwork's so good.
No, he does. And just the one little short point for me, L-stepping. Not something you see a lot in MMA, but in boxing, of course, you do. Max Holloway used it really to perfection against Calvin Kattar. He had that one moment where he was saying he's the best boxer ever. That's all he did to get out of the way of the punches. You take one step back, you take one step to either the right or the left. It sounds very simple, but no one in MMA does it. And the fact that we are starting to get, I won't say high-level boxers, because I won't disrespect the sport of boxing that way, but we are starting to see guys in MMA use actual boxing techniques that were never around, I'll say up until like 2015. It's kind of like with calf kicks. Calf kicks are the new three-pointers in MMA all of a sudden, and we're starting to see jabs are being incorporated a lot more into MMA. We're starting to see a lot more footwork being used as an offensive tool as well as a defensive tool. And Makhmud Muradov, for being so young in his UFC career, is showing a lot of those X-factor skill sets that you don't really encounter until you do look at the top of the division.
And for Makhmud Muradov, 2020 really stalled him out. He was originally booked with Shoeface. He was booked with Carl Roberson, Christoph Jotko, and then Kevin Holland. Unfortunately, he was forced out of the fight with Kevin Holland. So in steps Andrew Sanchez. And this is a guy that he came in on the Ultimate Fighter and really just kind of took the world by storm. Won it at light heavyweight, finished it off with a great decision win over Carl Roberson. Carl Roberson, Khalil Roundtree. And in that fight, he went back to his strengths. He really wrestled well, really put on a good pace over Roundtree. Wins on that season over Phil Hawes that a lot of people are still excited about in the UFC, and Eric Spicely, and he knocked him out in the first round. And listen, Eric Spicely had a bad time out last weekend, and he was really looking to punch his ticket back into the UFC for a third time. But for Andrew Sanchez, the blueprint has been, or had been, this guy is an NAIA two-time wrestling champion. He goes to his wrestling, and if he strikes, he's probably going to wear himself thin. And if you really want to go back into a fight that accentuates that, it's his UFC second time out with the UFC, because he picked up a win as well over Trevor Smith. That was in his UFC debut, I guess, after winning the Ultimate Fighter. His fight against Anthony Smith, where he beat the brakes off of Anthony Smith for 2 rounds, and then in the third round, his cardio fell off a cliff.
And you know that game in The Price is Right where it's like, that's his cardio in the third round. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Because you look at Andrew Sanchez throughout those first 2 rounds, really pick any fight. We're only taking out the ones that he lost in the third, but any Dirte fight, he looks great. He's a good wrestler. He looks into it, and he looks like he has really good cardio because the type of takedowns he goes for, very high impact, very explosive versions of takedowns. Then he wrestles himself into exhaustion. It's that Malcolm Gordon, Andrew Sanchez. It's going to be known as the Andrew Sanchez theory from now on.
Hopefully it's not like a partly Canadian thing
Hopefully
either.
not. Okay, now I'm a little worried. But for Sanchez, the striking is a weak point. It's just, I think his wrestling's almost too good for his own case. And you look at his wins. So he beats Trevor Smith. Not really a guy who can take advantage of his cardio in the third round, because that's what a lot of this comes down to. If you have decent power and a good gas tank, you can beat Dirte. The people who do struggle with him are other guys who do have cardio issues themselves. You look at the Marcus Perez fight. He's beating up Perez, but they both get tired in that third round, and he's just able to do enough to not get finished. Marc-Andre Barriault, it was a fight that happened. It wasn't great.
But in that one, it was the same thing.
Exactly.
Power bar Marc-Andre Barriault to win, he has to wear on guys. He got outworn in that one. You go and watch the Marvin Vettori fight, and from the first, as soon as they tap him in and they get ready, Marvin Vettori's on Andrew Sanchez, and that's how he was able to win. It was just pressure, volume. He had Andrew Sanchez hurt in about the first minute in that one, and just from jump, he was able to get the win. And then the fight against Wellington Turman, That was a really interesting one. And we saw a bit of a progression from Andrew Sanchez the last two fights. Because again, where it used to be a lot of wrestling, he switched things up. He went to TriStar. And we've seen a lot of fighters not have success that have gone to TriStar lately.
We never thought we'd say that sentence, first of all. Two people growing up in Canada throughout the heyday of GSP. And now TriStar, it's not that it's a bad gym by any means. It's just, listen, gyms go through ebb and flows. They go through ups and downs. But right now is a bit of a down for the gym.
So for Andrew Sanchez, he went to TriStar, and then all of a sudden he became like a point fighter in karate. And you saw it in the fight against Marvin Vettori. You saw Sanchez come out, and he still had his hands high, but it was a nice wide stance, and he's moving well. The fight against Wellington Turman, I mean, if I could stand up and show you this, I would. I'd love to start doing more stuff like that. But in that fight, hands super low. He cocked him low, but he kept his hands low, and he moved back and forth and really stayed on the balls of his feet. Those two both struck. He did get hit a couple of times by Turman, but by the end of that first round, knocked him out pretty well cold, hit him with a really nice hand early on in that one. That's the weird thing. He's become this point fighter, karate type fighter in his last two, but we know that he has that wrestling in his back pocket. That's what makes this fight so interesting, because for Makhmud Muradov, again, I don't know if I've seen a boxing type in MMA find so much success. This should be a great one.
It really should be. Here's the thing. Hey, Andrew, don't come out here and start fighting like a karate fighter. This is not the fight you want to be testing your striking skills against, because Makhmud Muradov, he has good takedown defense. Here's the thing, though, for Sanchez. If he is getting success early on, if he is having a lot of success with his wrestling, he's going to stick to that game plan throughout the fight. I really doubt he is going to go out there and try to strike with Muradov, because if you've watched any of Muradov's fights, not only does he have the power, he has a nice diversity in his strikes, too. We talk about the boxing, not afraid to mix his kicks in, too. It's weird, too, because for Muradov, it seems like his striking has become more MMA striking as he's progressed throughout his career. Because you go back and watch some of his early fights, because I was curious, like, okay, what did Floyd Mayweather see in Makhmud Muradov? He's pretty good. It's just you see that he does have the power, he does have the crisp boxing, but he has slowly incorporated more MMA techniques into his game. Just something you have to watch out for, because if Sanchez is going for a lot of takedowns, it's not like Muradov can't meet him with a knee, he can meet him with an uppercut. Like, the diversity of strikes that Muradov has is more than just a boxer who's now in MMA.
Yeah, I mean, such a great fighter, definitely deserves this shot. And you get a win over a former Ultimate Fighter winner, that's definitely a telling sign, and it really could win you over with a lot of fans. So in this one, if we have a look at the odds, Sanchez opened the minus 179 average favorite on best fight odds. He's now a plus 109 underdog. It's the biggest shift in the odds that we've seen so far in this card. For Muradov, open to plus 149. He's now at a minus 134. And if we look at the overall Topology votes, Matt, 563, 86% have Muradov to win, and 72% have him to win by knockout. Here's the weird thing. For Andrew Sanchez to win this fight, he has to revert back to the style that he came into MMA with that caused him issues and cardio issues at that. So it's a bit of a pretzel in the mind if you're trying to think of it that way. For Makhmud Muradov, for him to win, he just has to do what he always does. And that's where it gets really interesting. For me, this is a fight that I've kind of gone back and forth with. I think that we might disagree with this one. So obviously, I'm not going to put this one on my card because I don't feel overly certain with both guys. I mean, for Andrew Sanchez, he almost figured out the cardio thing. He beats Perez. He beats Barrio. You lose to Vettori. Well, there's no shame in that loss. Like, I think if Martin Vettori fought Makhmud Muradov, I would favor Vettori to win that fight 10 times out of 10.
He just beat Jack Hermanson in a 5-round fight. So
and the Sanchez win over Turman is great, but that style doesn't work against Makhmud Muradov.
No, it doesn't. And it's an interesting case, too, because when you look at Andrew Sanchez's losses, a lot of them could just be summed up to, well, he's beaten not that great fighters, and he loses to the elite. But there is more of a story to be told throughout those fights, because he will have success even when he does fight those upper-tier, upper-level guys. It's just, again, the cardio is such a big question mark for him. I'm going to pick Muradov in this fight. Here's the thing, though. I'm going to pick, Muradov's probably going to win. And here's why. I almost switched my picks. That tells you how confident I am. If Sanchez gets off to a really good start, I think it's going to be the worst thing for him. If he does go back to that wrestling style, I think Muradov has good enough takedown defense to at least make Andrew Sanchez work. I think he's going to get taken down at some point throughout this fight. But he is going to make Sanchez work, and that's all you need to do when you fight a guy like Andrew Sanchez. Maybe I'm too hyped up about Makhmud Muradov, but I do really like his ceiling.
We talked about this in the first fight of the night with Zhalgas Shumagulov. The fact that it's 1-2 reset. With Makhmud Muradov, he'll throw combinations, and you talked about the L-step too. He does normally take a second to place his hands and reset. Maybe Andrew Sanchez, that's when he can crash forward and work a takedown.
But
and
the
work
issue
a
is when he
takedown.
does reset, and you did it perfectly, when he resets, he does drop his hands, which is great for him. Because, again, Sanchez is going to have to be the aggressor in this fight. Because he's either going to have to close distance to get the takedown, or he's going to stand way too far on the outside, and neither guy's going to be close enough to engage. Because for Muradov, yes, he has kicks, but his hands are his primary weapon. And if Sanchez is kind of dancing around playing that Caitlin Chukagian game, he's going to get cracked at a certain point. Like, the most aggressive version of Andrew Sanchez is going to win him this fight, but also lose him this fight.
That's the thing. So I'm actually going to go with Andrew Sanchez in this one. Again, that wrestling background, from what I've seen in his UFC fights, you can kind of draw some comparisons in some of these ones. The win in the Ultimate Fighter is a huge one over a primary striker, or at least now Bangkok ready Khalil Roundtree. But in that one, again, it was the takedowns that won him the fight. He beats Trevor Smith. He loses to Anthony Smith, but he was winning the fight until he lost it. So for me, I'm going with Andrew Sanchez in this one. It's my second underdog through 3 fights, so maybe that's going to be a sign to come. But overall, I love this fight. This is really going to tell us a lot about both of these guys. Will Andrew Sanchez kind of be what we've known him to be, or will Makhmud Muradov win one over and he's exactly who we thought he was? So overall, I'm really looking forward to this fight. I have Andrew Sanchez by way of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Matt, you have Uzbekistan's Makhmud Muradov. I love this fight. I love this card. There's a lot of great fights coming up, including our main event between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. The rematch. Just keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.